United States. And I did most of my teaching in California. There you are. Did you turn
Hello.
it, you're off your phone and turn it back on?
I did. I had to do a restart.
Jana. Jana told
Thank
us
you.
the right thing to do. Well, there we
Um,
go.
you know what though?
Oh, every day, Jana. Huh. You know what I would ask? And listen, you got Carly, so you're in good shape. Um, but eloping every day, I'm so curious what time of day? Is it the same
hmm
time every single day? Because if it is, something's happening at that time.
Totally.
That would be my question. Carly, I was telling Jana while you were coming on my epic fail that I did as a parent today or yesterday.
Oh no.
My one of my kiddos has 2 days off of school today
Yes.
and tomorrow.
You
Yeah.
didn't know?
Did I know that before yesterday? Nah, I forgot. Hi, Ria.
Yeah.
Hey
Just
guys,
hi. Just
how's it
dropped my
going?
son's IEP in 10th grade per my son's request. He wasn't making any headway. That is very interesting. And as someone who taught high school, I think it's really interesting when you start have your children start having more agency in their educational
hmm
process. I remember I taught an alternative high school, and I had students. I used to have to mail a letter home to parents to let them know once their child turned 18, their child could say their parents couldn't attend the IEP meeting, and only they could. Most
hmm
students still had their parents attend, but some did say, like, nope, I want to do it on my own. So that's really interesting that your son did it in 10th grade. I really hope things go well. I'm wondering, I'm not going to say that because cha cha cha. I'm wondering if you guys switched over to a 504. And then Carly, Jana was talking about they've switched to an IEE,
hmm
or they're doing an
An
IEE
FBA.
for an FBA. I have another
Yeah.
family that's doing that right now.
Jenna, if they're doing that, my only suggestion is to make sure that the outside provider for the IEE tries to get at least two observations if that's not like their bare minimum anyways, because I know a lot of
Mhm.
people doing that have a really kind of funky way of doing FBAs because they're not in the school, but if you can get them to be there at least twice.
Really quick, I haven't done a live before with Ria, so this is Ria, everyone. And Ria, you want to tell your information and what your background is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey guys, thanks for having me on live. The last time I did a live maybe like a year or two ago, and things look different. There's like little gravestones with peace signs, all kinds of stuff. So this is exciting. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Ria, and I run Education Works. That's my advocacy company, my business. And I work with students and families. I work with students one-on-one tutoring, but then I also work advocating for families and students and going through the IEP. And I, like Carly, am very passionate about behavior and about making sure that all kiddos get the support that they need, regardless of what, the concerns are, what the disability is, what they need. I want to make sure that they have what they need. So that is who I am, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
We're excited to
Um,
have you, Ria.
yeah, so somebody's saying they haven't been contacted by their daughter's case manager this year. I would say, Tam, I don't know what grade your kiddo is. I didn't routinely reach out to like middle school and high school parents at the beginning of the year unless I had a question or something was going sideways. Sometimes the first time they heard from me was progress updates, but I had students in a resource model, so they were heavy on inclusion. I don't know about Ria and Carly, if that what you guys think about that.
I think that they did change case managers, you're supposed to be notified of that at the bare minimum. So, but that could look like them sending home a letter that your daughter never
Mhm.
got to. She's in fourth grade, like that. They don't always try their hardest. They just kind of like check a box when doing that. So that could have been kind of what that was.
Missed.
hmm
Tim, Lou, if you guys have a specific system that your school district or school uses, like a portal or Parent Connect or Class Dojo or whatever, I would figure out whatever the system is and get into that system so you can talk to them.
hmm
And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys have shared where you're from. I saw Tam, you're really close to me, like 30 minutes away. So that's pretty cool. And through TikTok, we found out that Carly and I are from basically the same town. So that was kind of cool where we grew up. So it's always fun to find people around here, but I'm in Macon, Georgia. And then where are you guys? Just so everybody knows.
I'm Cincinnati.
I'm in Maryland, like outside of Baltimore. But Ria, to your point, Val is in the city or the town that my
Yeah.
husband grew up in.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
so
It's
crazy.
very tiny.
That is so cool.
It's like the Brady Bunch. I don't know how old.
mhm.
Not the Brady Bunch. It's like the Leave It to Beaver here. It's weird.
um,
I like it. I love it. It's very sweet, but it's weird.
I was
So,
gonna say to Tam, if your teacher's using Dojo as their like main communication with the class, but that's not enough, then I would ask to have an IEP meeting and develop a daily communication or weekly communication where you're getting more information on like what's happening, especially I may have missed the beginning, but if it's about behavior, try to have an IP meeting about that and then say that you do need those updates and so on. So ask for daily or weekly communication outside of Class Dojo. That would be like a communication sheet. That could be a log. That could be a Google sheet. Um, did you ask in person, in over the phone, or in writing? Because we always want to do it in writing.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And I want to add too, I saw Chalet. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong.
I know. I saw that one too. Yeah,
I
answer
get
that one,
calls
please.
asking me how to deal with my son. I feel like I should get paid if I have to help them. And this was something that I always became really frustrated with teachers. Prior to advocating, I was an RTI coordinator, so I would work really closely with teachers who were calling home and things like that. And I think a lot of times the teachers don't actually know what they want you to respond with. Like they're calling, but they're not sure what they want you to say back. And so it kind of puts parents in this awkward position of like, okay, do I need to pick him up? What do you want the end result of this phone call to be? And whenever that happens, it can be really overwhelming and frustrating. But my main concern whenever that happens is picking them up from school and making sure that if you are asked to come get them, that it's documented, you have the reasons why, you know if this is a suspension, you're keeping track of that, how many times that's happening and things like that. So in elementary, I had to pick him up every other day. And that's not okay because at that point, your child's not receiving access to a free and appropriate public education. They're just not.
Also, I'm not sure if you have an IEP, but I would write into the IEP an alternative to taking away recess. There's alternatives. I'm working with a family right now who was told that, and then we found out actually they weren't officially taking it away. They were actually pairing him with somebody who could focus, like help him practice skills for interpersonal skills and to avoid hitting peers and things. Thanks, Marcella. And so if you do have an IEP or 504 or not, I think I would ask for a meeting about that. Also, some states at this point have banned being able to remove recess. So they're just kind of compounding his needs. I don't know how the behavior stuff that these gals have, but I know kids need to move. Also, this is so random, but if you guys can heart the live, that helps more people find us. Okay. Somebody brought up the 504 and the school saying they didn't think that they needed it. Did one of you two want to answer that one?
So with 504s, you still have to go through the same like kind of evaluation or a similar evaluation process as like an IEP. So it's not just like a personal like opinion. It has to be based on data. And so you still have to kind of figure out like, is there a disability that's impacting their education and being more of a barrier, and how is it impacting it? And typically 504s, I don't want to say are easier to get, but
it's a lot less complex evaluation process
right
to get there.
Yeah, and you're not proving the adverse impact. You're just proving that like there's an impact. Like the child just needs a bit more of accommodations to continue to access what their peers are accessing. So if they haven't done, hey Cam, if they haven't done the actual like evaluation process with the initial referral for 504, go back and look at those notes you have, and if not, send an email saying that you were denied that process and you're requesting that the team meet or reconvene to go through the process again. And you can also,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
You can also reach out to your District 504 coordinator.
That's what I was going to say.
To get more guidance on this, to make sure that the school team did follow the right guidance, and to have them attend or to have them coach up the team on the process as well.
And if you have an outside diagnosis or any outside reason that might warrant a 504 for your child, making sure that your school has that information is really important. Sometimes I find that parents withhold diagnoses because they're worried about it getting into the student file. And I would just say, if it's something that's going to help your child be able to access their education, I would share it. Oh, wait, wasn't Marcelo the one saying that he was being denied? Okay, Marcella,
Reassessments.
he's being, if it's illegal for him to,
So,
I
um,
would have a meeting. I would. One of you two behavior gals talk about some
so,
things she can bring up at the meeting, please.
um, Marcella, I think your point of them making pick up trash, that was another hot trend in schools recently because we were moving to like logical and restorative, right? So consequences. And so admin was thinking, oh, restorative means I'm going to have them rebuild their community. That doesn't actually make sense with the behavior at hand. So, you know, like having him pick because we're trying to avoid suspension, which I can appreciate, but we're doing it in a really backwards way. We're not actually like still teaching what the missing skill is. So I would ODD is a very um, controversial diagnosis, I think. I have worked with students who I do think have had ODD. I do think it's very complicated and trauma based in a lot of ways. But so when we really work with our kids with ODD or that diagnosis, we want to be able to approach it in a more trauma based way, which things like suspension, removal, and like the restorative of picking up trash isn't actually helpful. It's more like, how do we have those conversations? How do we repair the harm? How do we help the student understand the connection between their behavior and who it impacts? And then how do they address the impact? How do they go forward with building on their skills? So I would definitely call an IEP meeting. I would do a lot of research on like trauma informed behavior practices. And it's really, really heavy on the preventative. So if your child has a behavior plan, have the team focus on the preventative behaviors. And then also, if he doesn't have a behavior plan, then you should definitely be asking for probably an FBA, that functional behavior assessment at this point. But I talked a lot. So, Ria, if you have anything to add.
Well, I wanted to go back because sometimes we might not even be at the point of an IEP FBA process. It could be, before we even have a 504 in place, or maybe it's a student with just a 504, or maybe a student who's going through RTI or something like that. And I've seen that a lot where students will have RTI plans for behavior and then will not qualify for an IEP. So we're like, okay, how do we support this child where we're at and things like that. And you can still request an FBA even if your child doesn't have an IEP. And I also want to address the impact part, because at the end of the day, the IEP, the accommodations, whatever you're asking for them to put in place, or the FBA, whatever you're asking them to do, the best way I've found, and you guys can share your experiences too, but the best way that I have found to get schools to get on board with what I'm recommending is to show the impact, to clearly state, this is what's happening with my child, this is the disability, this is what they need, and this is how it's impacting them. Because at the end of the day, that's the main thing that we're really looking at to then put supports in place. So trying to find that impact, and that goes with ODD, that goes with SLD, that goes with anything across the board. But especially when it comes to behavior looking, I wanted to also talk back about the restorative practices, because I think a lot of teachers aren't really receiving the training that they need to properly implement things like this, or even things like PBIS, or, just any of this. They're given a very quick overview of how to do it. And so restorative practices ends up looking like picking up trash because they knocked over a trash can or something like that, rather than understanding that restoration comes, like you said, Carly, with the relationship building and understanding how to restore the relationship, not just the pencils that you knocked over or something like that.
If anybody's losing recess for knocking over pencils, I'm really upset about that.
Yes.
We had a bunch of good questions in there when you guys were answering, which was good. So just so everybody knows, all three of us work with people throughout the United States. You don't have to just have an advocate who works in your area. And then somebody said a pediatrician and a psychiatrist. Tiffany, you said that they recommended either a 504 or IEP. So here's the thing. You can't actually technically get a recommendation from an outside provider. Like the school is just going to be like, whatever. But if you reframe it into why they have that recommendation, like due to ADHD or due to the anxiety that's getting in the way and causing school avoidance, that's how you can have the school take it more seriously. I've definitely seen schools be like, ah, ha, ha, I got a like literal thing on a prescription pad for an IEP. I have seen that, like a doctor wrote on a prescription pad. child needs IEP, that's not going to work. But if you can go in and say why, or you can share an outside report with why, that can go a long way. So I've had families be denied a meeting, and then they have this outside report, and then everybody stands up and says, oh my gosh, new information, because they're technically supposed to consider outside evaluation, especially if it's new, that can inform what's going on right now. So that would be how I would handle that.
I did want to come back to a question about PBIS, because I know I mentioned that just a minute ago. PBIS is really frustrating, especially for students who struggle with behavior and the teachers that teach them, because there's like I'm trying to explain it in a simple way, but there's essentially a set of rules, and then if you break them, you don't get the PBIS party. That is oversimplified, but a lot of it is through Class Dojo. We're tracking points and things like that. And I have been able to work with school teams to adjust that PBIS expectation for students based on their IEP goals rather than the school-wide PBIS goals. But it's really like a case-by-case, team-by-team basis of how they want to do that. But there are ways to minimize the impact, the negative impact that PBIS can have when you have students that are struggling. I just wanted to throw that out there. I saw a question about that.
I saw Crystal said that she does some restorative practices in her classroom. And, you engaged in the conversation and the cleanup together and reflect and do the self-regulation. I think that's like, it all goes hand in hand, but there's a lot of people out there who miss all those different components. Hi, Maria. And so like, it's great that you're doing that. And I think more people need to understand that whole concept. I will say too, when I was teaching the middle school level last year, our admin really dove into restorative practices, but it was actually just it was really kind of hard to watch, because like, let's say my student would engage in some of the peers, a conflict, and they were in the wrong. And then we would go to the principal's office, and they would have like all the kids that like were impacted by the student, and like telling the student why like they hurt them. And that is like really, really hard to sit and like even as adults, like imagine like being in a room and having like people like you were like rude to or had a bad moment with, like telling you all the things you did wrong to them, and like you're not able to process that in the moment anyways. Your working memory struggles, your accountability, is hard. And then like, you're expected to be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry guys. Like, it's not going to land the same way. And I think like, we also need to think about the learner when we do those practices.
Wait, who was it led by?
Admin. Yeah.
Oh, so when I was a district administrator, we had one school psych who had been trained in it and was a school psych, and she led restorative justice circles. But there was like a ton of training that had to happen with students before they could even start doing those circles. So it wasn't like that was the first time you had seen it or heard of it. There was like it was a lot of priming, and then there were certain students that they knew it wouldn't be effective for, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree.
I know, Marcella, that happens. It's a lot. I always feel like I fail my kid. Oh, so Tamlu, there are some things that I recommend to families if that happens to you. Just really quick, sorry, ladies, I didn't mean to just jump right in. I'm sure there's other questions. I think, so something I learned from speech therapists is that when we get to the emotional point that we're crying or we're that upset, our ability to take in language has reduced massively, like over 50%. And so if you're getting that emotional in a meeting, which, listen, as a teacher, I a couple times did too, I would ask for a break. So just say like, I need a 5-minute break, and step out of the room, physically step out of the room, and then do a shake. Oh, she's a visual for this. Do like a shake or do something to like get that energy out, and then be able to go back in. They're not going to tell you no if you want to take a quick break, but just take a quick break so that you can refocus and re-engage with what's going on. Also, if you ask for information ahead of the meeting, that can help a lot, because you're prepped for what you're about to hear, and including like if you're about to hear anything about behavior, or sometimes it falls into like a subjective opinion about your child. I think it's a really good time to take a break and say like, oh, that felt really subjective, and like we're attacking my child, so I'm going to take a minute. I'm just going to step out of the room for just a couple minutes, and then step out. I've had families queue up their favorite song. I've had people, whatever works for you. Okay, I see you say, okay, great. But you have permission from all three of us to take a break so that you
Yes.
can re-engage with that meeting. Oh, it sounds like Ria has a visual for this, maybe?
Yeah. So this is my favorite book. I mean, I know this isn't book club, but this is such a, I mean, if you are a teacher, if you are a parent, if you are a person, I don't know if either of you guys have read this book. Now they do trainings on it. It is Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. And it is super easy to understand. It's just like a back and forth conversation and there's visuals. And I wanted to, this is something I talk about a lot with teachers, parents, students about how we process things once we start to become frustrated and overwhelmed. And I explain it to students like when our shoulders go up, because that's when we start to get tense. And this is a great example of regulation versus dysregulation and the way that we process things. So when information comes in, it stops right here when we're dysregulated because we are sensing danger. We go into fight or flight or freeze or fawn, right? But over here, when we don't have trauma, that information is able to go, or when we're not triggered, I'm sorry, that information is able to go up and we're able to do more higher level thinking and more accountability and more communication can happen. And so with students, we really have to remember whenever they are starting to get frustrated, whether it's just frustration with a test or it is, frustration that's manifesting as behavior kind of situation, whenever the more frustrated we get, our higher level thinking goes down. So we can't really communicate during that time. We can't really have these restorative conversations because they're not going to get past that fight, flight, or freeze. And the book is called What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing.
Thanks for sharing that, Ria. Marcella, I think if you're having that much stress and overwhelm prior to the meeting, making sure you're asking for at least an agenda of what they're going to share in the meeting is really important. There's like a research thing I read last year because I'm a super nerd or a few years ago, and it was about meetings. And the second we get an email notice that there's going to be a meeting in our brains, the meeting has started. So that's why you're having a hard time because you're already anticipating what's happening at the meeting. So if you can just get from them like what's going to be discussed, that'll go a long way. Won't get rid of everything, but it'll go a long way. Ooh, Ria, straight to you.
That was exciting. I haven't been tagged in comments before in live, so new experiences everywhere. Tiffany, what do you do when a child has a problem with a teacher? He has a 504. So it kind of depends on what the issues are. A lot of times I realized it comes down to we're at two very different ends with communication with the teacher. So for example, I had a student one time who got in trouble for running in the hallway. And I've told this story before, but they got in trouble for running in the hallway. And the teacher, was like, no, they were running in the hallway. They've got to go home. They were goofing off. And the student very adamantly denied running in the hallway. He's like, I wasn't. They're lying. And so I'm sitting there, as the neutral party here telling the student, hey, listen, I believe you. Let's just figure out what's going on, right? And so I asked him to tell the story. Well, I asked the teacher to tell the story. Then the student told the story, and come to find out he was not running in the hallway. He was dancing in the hallway, but he wasn't running. And he felt like that teacher was lying. And then when she realized, she's like, oh, okay, well, I can see how this escalated so quickly. And I think a lot of times there's conversations like that we really just need a neutral party in the middle to decipher where we need to be. And I see it's making him not want to do homework and go to school. And that I've had, one thing, let me just, on a very simple level, 504s, there is a way to have an accommodation that is a quality versus quantity approach. And I really appreciate that for situations like this, where students are beginning to not want to go to school and not want to do the homework. Because instead of saying, listen, you need to do 20 pages of homework, we can say, I need you to show me that you are able to complete these math facts, that you're able to comprehend this level text. Very specific skills that we can measure. Because at the end of the day, it's not the amount of homework they complete, it's whether or not they complete the skill.
Where did they go? Oh,
we went to look at your.
Oh, wait, sorry.
I texted those two because there was a comment. I'll just say it. Carly, there was a comment about, it was by Marcella. Marcella had actually called the meeting because the teacher told the class that her son has autism.
Oh, yeah. Good for you for calling the meeting. So this, I've seen this go both ways where parents are like okay with this happening. And so parents will allow the class, a teacher might explain something if there's been a lot of, things happening and you're just trying to help students understand why, but that's not for the teacher to make that decision on their own. A lot of times too, we've had like parents who will come in and explain to the class what's happening and why that's happening. But I would definitely call a meeting. I mean, like you did, that was a good idea. And this, if it's already happened, unfortunately, it's kind of done. I don't really know, Rhea, what you would suggest, but like I've done this before when I was a teacher in a regional program. So I had students who were in my self-contained class who would go out and like mainstream or push in. And I had a student who was having a really, really hard month and was like really kind of disruptive to the class. He was getting a bit aggressive. And students were there was a lot of like harm, quote unquote, done in the class. So I had to go in and I was just explaining to them, like, my role is to support this student. Like, we want everyone to be safe, but we don't like discuss what their actual like diagnosis is or their needs, but more so like, what is my role? What is your role as students? Like, how can you make sure that you might have your needs met in the classroom? So it was really cute. They were like, third graders, and they were like, well, we can tell when he gets kind of mad, like we're playing basketball and he won't pass, and then it gets this and that. And I'm like, in that situation, someone can go up to the teacher and just say, hey, I think so and so is struggling or something. And they were really, and I think it really helped build empathy, it built awareness. Like kids will start to become rude if they know these certain things, and the teacher can't just, and the thing is too, once teachers done that, they can't just leave it there. Like, you have to continue to then like address these things. Like, if you're going to talk about learner differences, you need to talk about them across the board, not just single out your student. And you have that conversation of like fairness versus equity and stuff like that, and keep it going, and then keep modeling things as the teacher.
That's one of my favorite conversations, is the fairness versus equity. What's fair might not always look equal. And that's just part of life and humans and differences and things like that. I have had very similar situations where we had sort of protocol. It wasn't for any one specific student, but in case of any sort of emergency or where a teacher needs to attend to one or two students, when we need to evacuate the room, we've had a protocol for that. And my favorite co-teachers when I was a special education teacher were the ones who understood that, like, hey, your responsibility, we treat the whole class as our class, both of us. Mm-hmm. But in these moments, the general education teacher knows I've got the rest of the kids, and I know I've got this student. And as long as we know our clearly defined roles, we know exactly where we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do, and we have that in place ahead of time, it has really helped. And I've also seen the same thing with students who, when we know there's an emergency or something where everyone needs to leave the room, during that protocol, the students have been so helpful and supportive and like, oh, this is fun. It's turned into a really positive experience with like empathy and understanding others and communicating with others. And I've noticed too that students have developed awareness of their own needs from this, of like, I'm feeling frustrated too. They're a little bit more able to voice their frustrations and concerns and things like that. So I do like it as a learning experience, but not at all singling out one student or, ever addressing it as a us versus them kind of situation. Cause that's kind of what it ends up feeling like.
Othering that person.
Othering, yes.
Now there's
you guys
questions.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to address the ED one. I'm going to pause on that and let one of you two answer that one. But I did reply back to Addie Peanut to get a little bit more information before I try to tackle that one. High school senior with ED. I'm curious, A, what grade, and B, what the program looks like. I'm wondering if the services that are on the IEP are not actually the right services for them. I think sometimes adults get really big ideas and good ideas of how to support students, and they decide like it's going to look exactly like this. I worked with a family last year. That was absolutely the situation. And the student didn't want that, but he wasn't able to say it in like a meeting, even though he's in high school. So I had him chat with his parents outside of the meeting, not during the meeting. We had a whole separate meeting. We found out that the student really wanted to do vocational education. And so we found a way to make that happen, but a lot of steps needed to be taken to facilitate that. But we wouldn't have known if we hadn't taken a step back and really assessed, like, are these the right services? Notice I didn't say placement, because your child's needs are determining what the services are, and then the services can inform placement, but it's not the other way around. So give us a little bit more info.
I was gonna say too, for that situation, learn, share, grow. I think that happens a lot, and then we kind of assume like, oh, well, they don't want it, so we need to. They're refusing it, so we take it away. And it's actually they're refusing it. That's them telling us it's not working for them. So then it's our job as the adults to reprogram, like get more creative, get more flexible. You know, if a student's saying, "I'm not going to be pulled out, I don't want to do that," then we need to figure out, okay, how do we push in? How do we apply those more? Like a lot of kids in high school, especially in our ED category, who have a lot of social awareness and are very, very attuned to like how people treat them, how peers see them. We have to then become way more subtle in our application of that special design instruction, because if not, they're just going to push away. And so it's our job then to program better for them.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that worked really well because I had students a lot of students had emotional needs and behavioral needs, but they were still classified under SLD. They just didn't re-up it because it can take a lot of work, and there's a lot of stigma with that eligibility, unfortunately. Should be. It's just information, how best to serve a child. But I did a lot in classes, even when it wasn't like a required collaboration period or inclusion period. I would just be in and out of classes that I knew my students were in. I never just went to my students, went to everyone. So every single year of teaching, students would be like, I want your class. And I'd say like, oh, I can't, look, they ran out of furniture. I don't have enough seats. And they'd be like, so-and-so has extra, we're getting them. And so, but like making it seem more like I'm just a teacher here rather than like, oh, I'm this special teacher here. I think that goes a long way. And to Carly's point of like it takes away the othering of students, right? Like, oh, that class is just always small. Kids figure it out eventually. But if you're the type of teacher who's helping everyone, it can go a long way. Mama to 3, nobody should be telling you that there's not a budget for it. Services are not based on budget. It's based on need by data. I'll let one of the other gals speak for a minute.
Well, just to go back to what we talked about earlier with the impact, I think whenever you're advocating for anything, that's the biggest thing that you can do is show the impact. And so if we're looking at a one-on-one, we want to, a lot of times you can get to that point, but in steps. And maybe you guys have seen this before where we have no support. Okay, well, now we got a para. Or now we got a co-teaching. Yeah. And now they're still not successful. And we have data to show that impact. So we can kind of move our way into a one-on-one. And if you're already kind of along that journey, so to speak, it's going to be a little bit easier to prove the impact for a one-on-one directly. But I would definitely just start with as much support as they're willing to give and then work on showing how that's impacting.
Yeah. I feel indifferent about one-to-ones right now because I think that there's such a crisis in education that a lot of people are misinformed on a one-to-one. It's very much something we put out as like, oh, this is the ultimate support. And you might get a one-to-one on your IEP, but then they can't staff it. And then all of a sudden your child has less access to things and people then tie your student to this support and like, oh, the one that's not here, they can't go. Or let's pull them back out. Or we're trying to make this work. So because they don't have one-to-one, we're actually going to change up their services very like under the table kind of thing. And so I always like try to suggest and advocate for like what are the actual like programming supports you can put in play. What are some really strong accommodations? What do the goals look like? Are they really appropriate? Are we targeting the skills that would promote some of that like independence? And the goal isn't always like ultimate independence, but it's like how can they be a part of their classroom? Like is it, I think that a one-to-one is most often necessary when there's certain things the child needs like immediate like support for, like if it's hygiene, self-help skills, some like strong like behavior interventions that are happening right away.
Somebody put health.
Yeah. Okay.
Health
so
health is a solid one. Yeah.
So if that's the case, then the budget shouldn't be an issue, and you just like Rhea said, like show all the ways that you've tried, and now like, and there's some language, I think in IDEA where it's like, it's not about the budget, it's about like what is the program and what is the services.
I do want to come back to someone said, are they not liable to find a substitute? And this is a simple question for one situation, but it's a really, really big issue. And I think that the best way I can explain this is when we think about just like holding schools accountable and advocating for kids and what they need. it is so much more effective to work with the school team and get them to put things in place than it is to go through due process or filing an OCR complaint or something like that, because those state complaints and things like that, they're not going to fix the things that are happening right now with your child. Mm-hmm. They may fix things a couple years down the line for the school district as a whole. Yeah. Someone might get a slap on the wrist, but at the end of the day, it's not going to do anything for your child. And I hate to say it that harshly, but it's true. And so to back down to that question, are they not liable to find a substitute? They are, but are we going to go through a 3-year court case to prove that they should have done that? I mean, that's kind of where we're at, is like, it's not okay. And we're fighting against it, and we're collecting data, and we're holding schools accountable. But in the moment, it's not going to impact that kiddo when that teacher's out for that day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're one-to-one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to one that I'm going to speak to for a second, and then you guys are happy. I'm happy to have you guys jump in. So Addie Peanut said that their kiddo was told by the teacher, like, he did a bad job on a presentation. Mm-hmm. He has social anxiety, but it's not addressed in the IEP. Addie Peanut, I would request an IEP meeting like today. And I'll just start the email for you. Hi, school district. My son, who has an IEP, also has social anxiety. I noticed in my IEP review that I did that it is not addressed on his IEP, but it is affecting his access to his education and his ability to be successful in the classroom, as evidenced by, and then bring in what just happened with this teacher. I'm looking forward to having a meeting soon in the next couple of weeks so that we can update his IEP so that it more accurately addresses his educational needs. If your child has social anxiety and it's not being addressed in the IEP, it could go very sideways very quickly. Not to like be a fearmonger or anything, but I just feel like school refusal often happens because things, it's like a snowball of these types of things happening. And so because your child already has an IEP, it should not be hard to add this piece in and get the appropriate supports needed. And I'm going to go really on a wild tangent for a second. In addition to accommodations and potentially modifications, like I used to have students who had social anxiety, and they would do the presentation to me directly out in the hall or somewhere else, so that they didn't even have to deal with their peers, which meant I could truly see what they could do, because that's the purpose of an evaluation, is to truly see what the child can do, not can they do it in front of a class. And then the other piece I would say is, if it's truly something that's impacting them, there should potentially be a goal so that they can start learning skills to be able to effectively move through some of their social anxiety. That would be my soapbox. And now I'm getting down and letting these ladies talk.
Mm-hmm. No, that was really, I think that was perfect advice. The one thing I would say is that in your letter, that was a really great example. You said, I'm looking forward to, I would explicitly, I'm more abrupt.
I know, I'm so positive.
I would be like, I am requesting an IEP meeting. Like, there's no room for
no. Yeah. Requesting an IEP, I'm looking forward to it happening soon.
Have those two like sentences there.
Yeah.
And the date. Make sure you have the date on it.
Yeah. Jana, state complaints, in my opinion, I think I suggest to file a state complaint when it is an obvious like compliance and procedural mistake or error that the school has to go back and correct. So like things like comp ed are pretty good. And you always want to like make sure in your state complaint you're giving the suggestion for what the corrective action should be. But most often, like a state complaint is the corrective action that they do find the school out of compliance is to like teach the staff or provide another training to staff. So like if you're just in a disagreement about the programming for your child, a state complaint most often isn't going to get you there unless it's because they're in disagreement because they didn't follow the right compliance or procedures to get there. So that's just something, because I know again, it's such a long process. So really, you can file a state complaint, but they have like 60 days to actually investigate it, and they always take their time. And then there's like a timeline for them to meet to talk about the corrective action. And then that corrective action could then take, if it's an evaluation, like 90 days or something, or a new evaluation or reeval. And so sometimes a good option is to just, Val and I talk about this a lot, like those grassroots efforts to like send emails to your superintendent, send emails to the head of the special department, contact your board of ed.
Board members.
Board of ed is so powerful. Send them emails. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, like time and time again.
That's one thing that I do recommend. It's in the advocacy and action program that we're working on together. One of the first things that we do is go through your school district and see like, okay, who's my child's case manager? Who's the teacher? Who's above the teacher? Who's the admin? And go all the way up, because unfortunately, like you said, the squeaky wheel or eel, I guess, whatever, squeaky wheel gets the oil. So the more familiar you are with that chain of command, and I don't mean to say this, or I don't mean for this to sound any kind of way, but you don't necessarily always need to reach out to that higher up person. If you're in a meeting and something is going sideways and you say, oh, that's no problem, I'll reach out to, Valerie at the board, sometimes that will be enough to get the ball rolling.
It is enough, usually.
So, yeah. Just having that knowledge of who they are.
Yeah. Somebody sent a gift. Thank you so much. I don't understand enough on TikTok, but thanks, Mom of 6 boys. I have no idea what that is. Thank you. Yeah. For all of us. Jana, I'm sorry to hear that. They should have done something much sooner if he was eloping daily. Listen, there's a period of time, and especially Rhea can probably speak to this way more than I can. There's a period of time where I'm not surprised kids are eloping from kindergarten, even students who don't have an IEP, don't have a 5. I don't know what these gifts are, but thank you.
Thank you guys.
All of us are very newer with the lives. So we're like, oh, thanks. But there's a period of time where I expect it. But if you're saying he was doing it every day for months at a time,
So with little ones, I've worked with all ages, but I don't want to say my favorite, but I love to work with the little ones, like pre-K, kindergarten. I love it. And there's glitter, there's stickers, like it's a wonderful place to be.
I never had glitter as a teacher.
I love it so much. But the problem is, sometimes we don't look at the context of kindergarten, because
kindergarten is hard.
I have a 6-year-old, and I mean, he's going to cry sometimes at things. He's going to not remember to raise his hand. He's going to walk out of the room sometimes. Maybe he needed to just use the bathroom or something and forgot the procedure. 5-year-olds are going to call out. They're going to do these things. And so when we use words, I also don't love the word eloping, because I don't think it's always super specific, because teachers will say eloping, but it just means going to another corner of the room. So I think that's something that we need to be clear about with language. But if we're leaving the room, we're leaving the classroom, or we're leaving the building, those are obvious safety concerns. And while that might be age appropriate for a 5-year-old, if it happens more than, I would say, like 2 or 3 times, at that point, that's a concern, because we've had teaching opportunities, right? And so at that point, we're realizing the teaching opportunities did not work. So we do need to figure out what's going on. And that's kind of where I fall with the little ones, is we always give teaching opportunities. We always give the benefit of the doubt, because we're all coming from different backgrounds. Some families, I would assume, I come from a smaller family, but I would assume a larger family, like, we might have to talk over each other at the dinner table because there's a lot of people there or something, So you don't know what background people are coming in with and what they're used to, especially little ones. And I think giving them that chance and that opportunity to learn is the first step.
Hey, since you guys are such behavior people, here's my question to you, because I never taught kiddos who eloped or left the room or did anything. Maria, I'm going to have these guys that's what I was priming them for. So when I was a district administrator, I had never seen an autism specific classroom. I'd never seen a kindergarten classroom being taught, because I taught middle school and high school, and I didn't remember my own kindergarten, other than that I personally got in trouble all the time. And so probably why I went into special education. But I went and observed a kindergarten room to observe one of the students who had an IEP. He was doing beautifully. The whole rest of the class was off the hook. I think I had to debrief for like 2 days after it. There were children rolling on the floor. One child was meowing like a cat. I went over to one child, because I was a teacher at this point, held out my hand, and he spit out like Unifix cubes into my hand, because I saw him like putting them in his mouth. One teacher. Yeah, to over 25 kindergartners, because it was California, so they were super packed classes. And I just remember thinking, like, if I was a child, I would want to leave this room too. So, like, can you guys speak to some of the reasons that kiddos elope? Like, why do kiddos, especially in younger grades, why are they eloping? Like, I think a list would be so cool.
Wow, what a tall order. I'll let Rhea talk about the youngers. Middle school is my jam. I'm a I'm a psycho. I love middle school.
I was middle and high school all the
Oh,
way.
so I love the little ones. Like elementary is
They need help
definitely.
with like blowing their nose, Ria. Like,
I know that's so cute. Like, oh, I can't blow your nose yet. Like, here, let me help you. It's
no.
fine. Like, here, this is how we use hand sanitizer. But anyway, so I think eloping. I would agree with you 100%, Val, on the I'm overstimulated in this room. There's no way these kiddos aren't. And to go back to what I said earlier, you got to remember too, they're not used to being in a room with 20 other people. They're used to being in a room with mom and dad and brothers and sisters and things. They're not used to this. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is, I think a lot of times the elopement behavior can come from, I don't want to say attention seeking. That's not at all what I'm saying, but I think it's like a boredom combination with attention seeking. Like, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Maybe they are not understanding the directions or something like that, or they've been given a task that they either don't understand or they completed it early, or, any of those types of possibilities. And it just slowly escalates to the point where being out of the room feels safer to them based on what's going on. And that could be the sensory overwhelm. That could be boredom. That could be a need that the teacher isn't meeting, which when there's 30 kids in a classroom and they all do need help blowing their nose, it's understandable. It might take a few minutes. But I think there's a lot of reasons, and I do think it depends on the individual kiddo. But I think a lot of it comes down to just the need for more support.
We have an OT in here. Brianna, you should know these two tease me nonstop because like every single intake I get, I'm like, have you worked with an OT? And I've had two parents who are clients of mine email me this week that because they did some outside OT in addition to in school, and the parents are like blown away of how they can help their child differently at home, like just all kinds of different things. Thank you so much for being here, OT. Also, really quick, I'm going to just say really quick, when kiddos told me, and this might be because we did middle school and then I did high school, the second a kid told me they were bored, my antenna went up and I got worried because to me, bored was like a word they could use when they couldn't explain what was really going on. So like when a kid told me they were bored, I immediately was like, something's going on and I need to figure it out. And there was always something going on. It was never that they were just bored. Like we are as adults, I guess.
Yeah. Three things I think that are on my brain right now. It's number one, someone did ask if a BCBA can be a behavior consultant. Yes, if that's how the county staffs them, then that's probably who your staffing is. I was going to answer, middle school. Most often when I was teaching middle school as a behavior interventionist to a regional behavioral program, when my kids would go into gen ed, most of the time, like in middle school, the eloping was so different because like the kids just get up out of their seat, just walk away.
I know,
like,
they just get up and leave.
Or be like, can I go to the bathroom for 20 minutes?
And then
like,
they're gone for 15 minutes.
And so often it was because they felt unwanted in the classroom. Like they could feel the teacher singling them out. They could anticipate that coming. They were stressed out and they're like, I'm not going to go to a class where this teacher's gonna be constantly nagging me. So it was a lot of working with the teacher and like revisiting that behavior plan and really working on strategies for the teacher to make that child feel a sense of belonging again, because so often kids are like, they don't want me there. Why am I going? Like, I'm not learning in there. They're not helping me. They're only making me feel worse about my questions, or I'm off task and they're just going to be mean to me. And it's like the kids that are like, seen as like obnoxious, but they really care. So it's like, that's what I saw a lot. I mean, obviously you got to do your FBA, figure out whether it's like, and sometimes we like to escape that attention, right? Like we don't want to be singled out. And then the other thing, there's a lot of questions coming in, but Val, I was wondering.
I know, I was like, I just got overwhelmed. I'm going to sit back.
Because Val is the OT request queen, and I've learned from Val to do that. So Val, what is the language you use when you're in IEP meetings and you notice there's a behavioral, like it's a conversation about behavior, and you're going to request that OT evaluation? Like what is, walk us through that.
My cues that we're going to talk about OT is when the kid is hiding under the table a lot. And I am so glad we have an OT in here because she can probably answer. And then I did say, or they, I don't know, sorry, Brianna, what pronouns you use, but it's when they go under the table, because to me, that's like they're trying to take a cocoon for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think I also think about it a lot because I did therapeutic recreation before I did special education in the water. So I saw the impact that like different environments did on children very early. Like water is so like it's sensory deprivation. So kids could then listen. And I remember noticing that, or kids who were non-speaking spoke when they were in the water. And so I had like an early exposure to like, whoa, what we're doing to the body affects what we can do with thinking. And so I look for if they're hiding under the table or eloping, if they're tearing up papers a lot, like the second they get a worksheet, if they break their pencils a lot, if they lose items all the time that would allow them to be able to work, I noticed that. When they so something that teachers sometimes say and they don't realize they're saying is like the student is like bumping into walls all the time, or bumping into them, or bumping into other students. So like that stuff. And then also if parents tell me like when they were little their child used to crash into them all the time, or like always wanted like really strong hugs. So sometimes I get it from the parents, when the parents are, when I'm doing like a parent intake and they're telling me different things, I can tell like, oh, there's some sensory stuff going on. But I did have a family this week, and they've told me that I can share things, but that they were, when we were talking, they told me that their child, when their kiddo at home was stressed out, he'd go start running laps. Like they never told him to go outside and run.
Mm-hmm.
He just would go out and run laps. And so I was like, oh, we need to do some OT eval. And every single time I've said OT eval, all I've actually been looking for is like sensory diet information.
Mm-hmm.
Like I learned from OTs the importance of like a sensory diet. And so consult, I'm really just looking for consult. But every single time I've asked for it, it's been added to the IEP, which tells me we are way underutilizing OT in schools. And I think some of it is because it's hard to get OTs. And I think people don't understand it, but that would be my biggest thing. Okay, I've pontificated long enough and I'll stop.
Wait, can I add to that? Like,
Yeah.
because you just reminded me of my middle schoolers. I think like that looks so different sometimes for our middle schoolers. Like these are the kids who are constantly doing TikTok dances. They're walking in the hallway doing all those little dances, and you're like,
yes.
What do you need? Like, do you need? And but like they just need it. That's like their input and their output. And teachers like, stop dancing when you're in the line. It's like they honestly need to. Is it that disruptive? No. Like they just need to move. And so when I see like a lot of reports coming in, and like teachers who don't understand this will call that defiance, right? They're like, oh, I asked them to stop dancing and they didn't, or that dancing in the hallway that became running in the hallway. Like semantics matter. And so it's really important to like just kind of think about, like, you can literally see their energy just like pent up and then try to get it out. It's like, okay, that's self-regulation, that's nervous system, that all makes sense.
Yes.
And that's all the language you take to those meetings to request those things.
Well, I think
really quick. Sorry,
Yeah.
really quick, and then I'll stop. The other reason I asked for OT to at least screen, and I really want to have our OT who's in here join us at some future one, is sometimes we're off on what we think. Oh, it says that we have inactivity in their live.
I don't know.
Hang
I
on.
don't see that.
Hang on. So, okay, I had to drag a pedestal piece. I don't know. But I think that sometimes we're wrong. So I had one family last year who we all thought a student needed to like jump and do heavy work. And because that's what he was showing, but it was actually because he was so dysregulated. He needed a different type of input. We would never have known if we didn't have the OT do a full evaluation. So I think that's the other reason, is sometimes we're off because we're not OTs. And so we're just trying our best. But yeah.
Yeah, I know Rhea had a point, but I was going to add something. So go ahead, Rhea.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back to the semantics thing that you mentioned earlier. And you also mentioned something about it, Val, about the language we use and also the language that the students have. Because, you know, it might show as boredom. It might show as defiance. It might show as, can't think of it, unfocused. You know what I mean? It might show as these things, too hyper, too energetic, you know, and I hear all of these things from teachers, but at the same time, they're hearing it, but not processing it from an adult's lens of what does that actually mean and look like. Is it defiant that they're dancing in the hallway, or is this truly meeting their need? And I know in my classroom, I had the same situation, Valerie, where many of the students just kind of thought that I was everyone's teacher because I'm just everywhere, you know, they are. And so a lot of times, to reduce the stigma for students, I can think of a few specifically, but many of them were students who struggle with behavior. They were allowed to bring a buddy from the classroom to come jump on my trampoline, or to like go outside for 15 minutes, or to, you know, come do an art project with me, or things like that. Because now it's not just this one kid being singled out to go out to this room to receive some sort of, you know what I mean? It's just, I get to bring my friend to Miss Davis's room. This is so cool. She has a trampoline. She's got a bubble tube. Like, let's have fun. And it's a lot better when you understand where they're coming from and you can meet that need without them having to verbalize, I'm really experiencing sensory overload right now, and I would really like this type of input. The kid's not going to tell you that. The kid's just damn bored.
We
I'm
can't
angry.
tell people that. Like, that's just not something we practice in our day to day.
So I see some things coming through about deep pressure vests, and I know people use like weighted blankets, and I'm sure Brianna would say something. I'm hoping I say your name right. One thing I learned from OTs is being very cautious, especially with like vests. And this is again why I like to consult with OTs. If they do a sensory diet, they'll give a time frame. Like the sensory vest is for 20 minutes, and then it needs to be removed and can't be used until this point. So I'm a big fan of safety and making sure we're doing things safely. And so I think if they're using vests, just making sure it's a part of a sensory diet and an OT has had input is really important just for your child's safety. And I don't understand why that's needed, but I would just say, see, somebody's saying you're not supposed to do it all day, even when it can provide that regulation. And there's a bunch of fancy reasons that I don't understand, but just really quick on that. We've had so many things come through. I'm going to be quiet and see. Have you guys been scrolling and seeing what's coming in? Shauna
back and forth
asked some questions. Okay.
I've kind of missed
I've missed so many. I'm so sorry, everyone. I got real excited about OT.
I did see a lot of people were relating to what we were saying. Shauna, I think I'm saying that right. I'm really bad with vowels. I apologize. If the skin thing, I would suggest maybe, is it the fabric of the clothing? Is it the type of clothing? Or is it they just want to pick? And I guess they're saying there's a lot of really cool tools out there right now with like cool sensory things on like Amazon where they can like pick out like almost like putty out of these like metamorphic rocks or lava rock something.
Oh, cool. The picky tab things.
Yeah, yes. And you can pick them. Adding like tape to the desk, they can pick that. You know, all that kind of stuff. But it is 10 o'clock, so I have to jump off. But this is really fun. I'm sure we'll be back again. I'm not, you guys are probably going to stay, but I had to hop off. So
I can do a few more minutes. Ria, can you do a few more minutes?
Yeah, I can do like maybe like 5 or 10. That works.
Okay.
All right.
I'll let you go because I haven't gotten to do a live with you. Bye. Thanks, Carly.
I don't know how to get out of here. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh yeah, we should find some Amazon. I don't know any Amazon links for the sensory stuff. I'm so sorry. We'll find some and put it in our bios.
Well, I was going to say, we just talked about the other day coming up with a list like ahead of the holidays for sensory friendly items and things that could be helpful, like the picky pads and things like that. So as we come up with that, we can definitely share it with you. Informal suspensions, I am not okay with.
Me either. That's why
no, we don't do that. Because, and I'll tell you why, that's the manifestation meeting that they're trying to avoid. If the school says anything to you about a manifestation determination review, an MDR meeting, it sounds really scary, and it is for the school, because that meeting is to determine whether or not the behavior was a manifestation of their disability, which means the school didn't do their job. That's what that meeting is. They did not meet the needs of the student, and therefore the behavior happened. And schools have to do it once we've reached 10 days of suspension. And a lot of times they'll do informal suspensions to suspend without counting towards that 10 days. So I think everything should be documented. I don't really like anything informal when it comes to the IEP, if we're being honest. But yeah, I'm totally aware they're doing this on purpose to avoid the manifestation meeting. I wouldn't refuse to pick up or answer the phone. I know some advocates do give that advice, but I don't like it not answering.
Safety of your child. There might be a safety concern. So I would always answer. You can say like, I'd like this to be documented as a suspension. You can say that. I'm happy to pick up my child, but I'd like to know if this is documented as a suspension. And if they say no, great. I'm glad you always answer.
Yes.
If they say no, I would just say why. Like if you're asking me to pick up my child and they're losing their educational opportunities, it would make sense to me that this is a suspension. I am working with one district right now who like they do have a way to classify it as something else, and it can still be brought up if we get to like an MDR or needing to request one. But I really would I would say it should be documented. I had a TikTok last year. My first one that ever went my version of viral was about suspensions. And it was more to help parents understand, like, it's okay. It's just data. Like, there's no value. All of the things are data. It really is. And I know it feels like value. And I have children and it feels like value when it's my children. I'm going to be honest. And I reach out to one of my advocate buddies. But I would say, oh, they wanted a way out of a meltdown. Yeah. So if it's like a meltdown situation, I think that's one thing. I'm working with a few families who sometimes they go and they just kind of help their kiddo calm down. We're trying to phase that out, right? Because that's obviously not sustainable. But if it's a suspension and they're asking you to take your child home, it should be documented as that. I think somebody had a question I wanted to. There was a vision thing. I'm not clear what you're saying. Can you put more information about that? Diamond, you said my son has visions IEP meeting. I'm not sure what that means. And somebody asked if their child might need OT for the 3-year eval. Maybe, I don't know. I would say, what's the evidence of dysregulation? So what is being shown that shows that your child might need more help with regulation? Ria, do you want to add to that?
I'm so sorry. I was kind of reading back through the messages here. I was trying to figure out Vision's IEP meeting, if that was like a revision or like an annual. I was trying to think of like typos that might kind of go with that. I think, but just kind of to address IEP meetings in general, well, as an advocate, I'm not nervous going into IEP meetings, but if you're a parent, IEP meetings are only going to help your child, are only going to help you communicate what they need, improve their IEP. So generally speaking, I wouldn't be nervous. That's an opportunity for you to advocate for your kiddo.
Lee, we both have links in our bios that we both have intro calls. So does Carly. You can just schedule an intro call with us. They're free. We all give a lot of information in those calls, and then you can decide if you'd like to work with us or not. Should the school? No wing suite. No. If the sensory tool is needed for your child to access their education, that's not a reward. That's like saying, does the child need to have a chair so that they can sit and do their work? They just need the chair. They don't earn it.
Now, I will say I don't agree with using sensory tools as a reward. You should not have to earn it. However, I have had reward time that was like playing with Play-Doh or something like that. So I just want to caveat that the sensory tools should never be, you can only get them as a reward, but you can still use them as like a playtime thing if you have Play-Doh or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And not contingent breaks either. It's your break to use those tools shouldn't be contingent on behavior.
I feel like we just go in a horrible loop then. Like we're dysregulated. We need our thing to help us regulate, but we can't earn it because we're dysregulated. So we're never going to get regulated.
So I have seen this so many times, this loop of that really, where it's like this, it turns into a back and forth power struggle with the teacher, really is what it ends up being. And it's not fun for anyone.
I agree, Pink Dancer. I agree. And I've done a few things about parent input and the importance of parent input. But when you're at a IEP team meeting, because parents and guardians are part of the team per IDEA, your input is required throughout. So like, it's not just parent input and parent concerns. It's everything. So when they're talking about present levels at the school, cool. How does that relate to what you're seeing at home? And that should be documented. And then when they're going over goals, if you don't see something that you think should be there, have a discussion. Goals can absolutely be written or updated at a meeting and after a meeting. If you need to do a part 2, because so much is coming up at the first meeting, do it. Like it's your input is throughout the IEP. Students who had massive parent input always had the best outcomes that were on my caseload, always, versus parents who just came in and nodded their head and said okay to everything. I didn't know enough about their child, especially middle school and high school. I had their child for an hour a day. I wasn't going to know enough. So, yeah.
I saw Shayna asked about when. It says, I have never had an educational advocate when going into an IEP meeting. When should I have one? And I have a couple of answers for this. And I know as an advocate, probably the best answer would be at every meeting you should have us for sure. But in all honesty, you don't need an advocate for every situation.
No.
Which is why Valerie and I and Carly and Mosh were all working in advocacy in action. I created this program for that reason, so that parents could advocate without having to hire an advocate every year.
Yeah.
And I think it really depends on your situation. There are certain situations where I 100% think you probably do need an advocate.
Yeah.
You know, if there are situations where your child is being denied FAPE, if they're in they've maybe been moved to a more restrictive setting that might not be appropriate, you've tried to advocate, it's not working, and you might not even need an advocate for every IEP meeting. And a lot of my clients, I'm kind of on an as needed basis. So like they'll do a couple of meetings, but if they know things are starting or they realize things are going sideways, I'll come in and attend the next one or do some communication with the team or things like that. And Valerie, you might have some more to add to that too.
I think I'm a big fan of working with an advocate if you feel like you need one. So like
That's a great answer.
I agree with Ria. Like if you feel like you need one, you're usually right. I have yet to have had a parent reach out and say like, I think I need an advocate. And then once I hear it, I'm like, no, everything's fine. Have not had that yet. So if you think you need one, you might. And then the cool thing is like if you work with someone like me or Ria or Carly or Mosh, who's working with us in the in Ria's program, we all teach you as we go. Like we'll teach you a lot of information so that you don't have to work with us if you don't want to. I have some families who say like, no, I'm going to keep working with you because then I can just go be the parent. Cool. If that's what works for you, we're happy to help. But I'm also happy to teach people so that they can do it. But I agree with Ria. There's times when you might need help, especially with all the transitions that are happening in education and all the changes and people being in roles. Like a lot of times administrators have never taught or been around special education, and then they're making really big decisions. Sometimes we need somebody else to step in, and that's okay.
And I do want to say to Shayna, thank you. It says, I feel like I need teaching. I know Valerie has a blog with tons of free
I do.
resources.
It's so much information.
Yeah, we all have resources for you guys that are free. So I've got a course on FBAs and BIPs, behavior intervention plans. So if your child has had an FBA or has a BIP in place or that's coming up or you want to request it, it is full scale. It's not just a free course. It's like, here's what it is. Here's what it does. I mean, it really does walk you through. It's a 5-day full thing. It's linked in my profile. And then Valerie, do you have your blog?
I was going to say it's linked. Yeah, it's linked. I'm in COPA. COPA doesn't certify you necessarily, but I'm a member of COPA. It's just a membership. But we both have experience working in schools. So I think that's a big thing that differentiates us as advocates than some other advocates. There's no like better or worse. I'm not saying better or worse. We just have experience working in schools, and I have experience as an administrator for special education. So that's just like a different skill set and awareness. Thanks, Pink Dancer. And then we both have freebies. Like I have like a meeting checklist. I have like a get your binder and paperwork organized freebie as well that you can edit. So we both have freebies that can help you out too. And then I have a mailing list. I just haven't used it. I know Ria has a mailing list too. Maybe we should start using it a little bit more.
So I'm not terribly, you might get a newsletter every like couple of months, honestly.
Yeah,
but like if there's anything important,
once a month.
Yeah, I try to be active with the email list, but honestly, that FBA training is a really good free resource. And if your child hasn't been evaluated yet too, and Valerie, you might have something similar, I have a really, really simple request and evaluation letter. It just says, I would like for my child to be evaluated, sign it, date it, make a copy for yourself, send it in.
I have a blog post about it. And
okay, so like perfect. So between the two of us, hopefully you've got some free support that can kind of keep you going.
Yeah, talk about 504 violations. Yeah, you need to have a meeting. If they're violating the 504, you should have a meeting. And if the school is saying no, just go to the next level. There's always a district 504 coordinator, so you can just go to the next level. Shauna, you might want to think about joining our course the next time we have it go up, or it's Ria's course. It's not mine. I get to just be a contractor on it, but you might want to think about that because then it's all the information in one place. So you're not jumping all around. Because even on my blog, like I have an IEP section, but you're still going to jump around to find what you need. So that might help.
And I'm going to type in, I don't know if it'll work. I'm typing my link in here. And then Valerie, if you send me yours, I can copy and paste it. That way you just have it.
Oh, mine's just pinchpointconsulting.com.
Okay.
It is hard, Lizzie. I think that's why sometimes people hire an advocate so they can continue being friendly and we can be the people. I think it's funny. Like I'm not mean. I'm not scared. I think the thing that scares people is when people like Ria and I start talking because we have all of the knowledge. It just inadvertently causes fear.
Did I spell everything right there?
Nothing came through. Do you see it? I didn't
On
see it come through.
in the comments.
Oh, I don't see it.
Oh, okay. Well, I did
You guys
type
can
my
go to our
link.
links though.
Yeah, I wanted to try and make it simpler, but maybe it's not. In the comments, I did put both of our links, but if you head to our profile and just click the
Yeah.
link, it'll give you everything you need right there.
Absolutely.
I'm
Okay,
so
I do
sorry.
have to jump off. Are you okay with jumping off, Ria?
Yes, I do need to get
Okay.
off and get some
Great.
things done, but it was awesome being on here. It's
Yeah, we
fun.
do this like once a week. So you guys, it's usually on Thursday mornings. So you guys can just kind of look for us on Thursday mornings, and maybe we'll actually put it in our. I'm so bad at lives. I don't even know how to like put like there's a live coming up, but we'll try to do that next time.
We'll try and
Thanks,
get
everybody.
more fancy with it, but for now,
Yeah.
thank you guys for joining us. This was fun.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye.